Life Audio.
Hello, and welcome to the Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic podcast. I am your host, John Seidel. This is your home for real stories, radical vulnerability, and remarkable comebacks. In the end, this podcast is a place for the desperate, the downtrodden, the destitute, and especially the drunk. But it's also a place of hope and healing. I know that firsthand because I'm the Christian who became an alcoholic, not the other way around. Today, I've found sobriety after decades of struggling. But more importantly than finding sobriety, I found Jesus. My prayer is that as I interview people just like you and just like me, along with professionals in the fields of trauma, faith, and addiction recovery, you will find the peace that is available to you through Christ on the other side of whatever you're going through and whatever addiction that might be. Because let's face it, we're all addicted to something. So welcome. Let's get radically vulnerable as we explore what it looks like to be on this journey of messy sanctification. We'll be right back after this. You know, one thing I like to make clear, and I'm going to make it clear again here today, right now, is that I don't believe that no one can drink. My wife drinks. My wife, when we go out for a dinner, she gets a cocktail. So I'm not against drinking categorically. I'm also not against people who have reevaluated their relationship with alcohol, felt a conviction to maybe give it up for a season, and then or have abused it at some point and then go back to drinking moderately. I'm also not against that. But let me say this about that second category, is that in my experience, there's a large number of people who are convicted about their drinking, who are convicted about their relationship with alcohol, reevaluate it, and then they actually should not go back to drinking. Like, that is their true conviction, but they do go back. And even if it doesn't become something where they devolve into what a quote-unquote traditional alcoholic looks like, it still is something that is just pinging at their soul. And maybe that's you today. That was our guest on today's show, Allie Kennedy. And so Allie is a pastor's wife. They are missionaries. She is a Harvard-educated, brilliant woman who was a college athlete. And she drank in college. It kind of consumed her. And then she gave it up completely after kind of this radical encounter with Christ. But then slowly, she started welcoming alcohol back into her life when she knew that it was something that she shouldn't, really, is what it comes down to. And that moderation, she was able to moderate for a long time, but it just became something that was quietly eating at her soul. And she finally realized, I have to surrender this to the Lord, and I haven't. And she did. And I love this quote that she says in our interview. She says, I knew God had called me to more, and I was eating breadcrumbs. And I just wonder how many of you are listening to this and you're eating breadcrumbs. Like, the Lord has a feast waiting for you, but you're like, no, I want that thing. Just want to keep, maybe it's alcohol.Maybe it's, I just want a little bit of, I'm not looking at porn, but I want those Instagram feed that has those women or those men in it that I really like looking at. It's not porn. It's fine. And the Lord's like, you're just eating breadcrumbs, and I've got a feast for you. And that's what I love about Allie's story and what she's going to talk about today. I think it's an important story. I think, and I hope, and I know actually that there's some of you that will resonate with it. So want to prepare you for this conversation. I think it's going to be a good one. Just a reminder, if you are new to the show, if you've been around and you haven't yet, you can buy my book, Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic, which this podcast is based on. It is still 30% off and free shipping from the publisher. I don't know how long, like it's been like what, 4 months since the book came out, and they still have this, and I'm like, awesome, I love this, keep going. Like, they haven't pulled the plug on that deal yet, so I don't know when they will. They may tomorrow. So please go take advantage of that. And I just want to say, like, I don't talk about numbers a lot, but we are at like 110,000 downloads of this podcast, and that's crazy. I mean, we've been around for seven months, and I'm just floored. I'm honored, and I just think it speaks to the necessity for radical vulnerability, which Allie will talk about, and you'll hear, like, she was a little scared to share this story, and yet she did because the Lord told her to. And as I alluded to, there was times in her life where she didn't listen to that prompting, and now she is. And so I'm so grateful for her. So without further ado, Allie Kennedy, mom, wife, missionary, former Division I Ivy League graduate, and athlete. And I'm excited for you to hear her story. Allie Kennedy. Allie, thank you so much for joining me today. I talked a little bit about you in the intro, but I really am excited to chat, because I think your story is one that a lot of people need to hear. I think that you are a great example that people who have an alcohol story don't all look like a certain thing. Their stories don't sound a certain way. And so I'm really excited to have you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I feel honored to be here, and I've been looking forward to this. So thanks for having me.
And we've literally moved, like, I feel like we've moved heaven and earth, because like, it's morning by you in the Philippines. It's night by this is actually, I will say this, you are my first night podcast. Now, people wouldn't necessarily know,
Wow.
But yeah, you are my first, we should call it Confessions After Dark.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I like to say I'm living in the future. I'm actually a day ahead of you. So that's kind of
right?
Cool. I'm living in the future. Yeah.
But that actually brings up something that I wanted you to talk about a little bit, is because I think you have a really interesting background. And again, part of the importance, I think, about that background is that it doesn't sound like a traditional, I need to take a break from alcohol story. And so, you are someone who is Ivy League educated, Oxford. So tell us a little bit about your background and then how you got to the Philippines.
Yeah, nothing really makes sense in my story. That's kind of been a theme, actually, is just the sense of adventure and, following after God. But I grew up in Montana. I'm one of four girls in my family. My dad was a dentist in my hometown, and my mom worked and was a devoted mom as well. But so I grew up in Montana and was big into sports. And that was really my ticket to exploring possibilities to play in college. That was my dream from early on. And so I worked really hard at basketball. That was my sport back in the day. And I played on competitive summer teams and traveled around, and eventually was recruited and scouted by the Ivy League schools, which was just incredible to me. I was like, me? Are you sure me? It was kind of like that experience, But yeah, just things kind of aligned, and I went to play basketball at Princeton. So that was kind of the beginning of opening up my world to the world, in a sense.
What was that?
That's the beginning of it.
Going from Montana to Princeton, New Jersey. As someone who spent 7 years in New York City, I told you there's this little train that runs, and it's called the Dinky.
Yeah.
And it's an awesome,
it's a
fun
charming
name.
little town.
Yeah, and I loved
Yeah.
when I lived in New York City and was going to school there, I loved going to Princeton. But I was a small town
Yeah.
Wisconsin kid that then
Mhm.
went to the big city. You're
Yeah.
Montana girl. I don't think there are any big cities in Montana, and the ones that pretend to be aren't. So,
Yeah, we call them big towns or small cities. I grew up in a university town, so there was that college atmosphere. But yeah, there's not really big cities in Montana. So I always say that the leap from Montana to New Jersey was my first culture shock experience. And now I live in Asia, so of course the culture shock kept getting more intense. But back then, yeah, going from a small town in Montana in the northwest of the United States going to the East Coast was
mhm.
totally new. And I grew up in a very normal family. I went to a public school. I was just a very normal gal, I think. And so to get to kind of have this experience was really cool. It was exciting, and I played basketball there all 4 years, so that was a big part of my life and my sense of identity at the time too, which is where alcohol also enters the picture, but we could share
Okay,
that
so and I think
at
you
the
were
appropriate time.
weren't you even like captain of the team? Do I remember that right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, my last 2 years, I was. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So
Yes.
tell us how alcohol. Well, actually, first of all, then let's skip the
Mhm.
alcohol part because
Mhm.
okay, Ivy League, and then how do you get to Oxford? How do you get to the Philippines?
Yeah, thanks. So I my senior year in college, I was deciding what to do with life, and a lot of my friends were going at that time kind of to the main cities in the United States, like New York, Boston, Chicago, to work in banks, like investment banking, consulting. That was really popular. Medical school, graduate schools, and I just had this sense like I'm supposed to do something different. Like I'm
Mm.
supposed to. And so there was a recruiter on campus recruiting for a Princeton in Asia program. So I was like, that's it. I want to do that. I want to go to Asia. I want to do something, kind of unorthodox. So I applied and got accepted. So that was my first time to Asia. I was placed in the Philippines, believe it or not. And so this is my second time in the Philippines. So that was 2006, a long time ago. So I worked here in broadcast media for 2 years, and then I went to Singapore for 2 years and worked for broadcast media. I was a news presenter and a newscaster, um, and I got to wear all the hats in broadcast. And that was kind of the time where God got a hold of me, and I recommitted my life to Christ when I was 23, and I was during this season that I kind of sensed a call to full-time ministry. So I went from Asia back to the United States. I was still single, praying for my future partner. I was like, Lord, I did want to, get married and have a family, but I was in my late 20s at that time. Went back to the United States, moved back to Princeton, New Jersey, worked in campus ministry for 2 years. So I worked with
Wow.
Princeton students, which was the joy of my life because it was just like I was the one that, was getting drunk on Friday nights, and I got to minister to that
Mm-hmm.
to that crowd, to that population. So it was during that season that I met my husband. He was studying at the seminary down the road to become a pastor, and I was going to say hooked up, but that's not the right term.
Yeah. These days you can't say that.
Connected.
Yeah.
Hookup was in my previous chapter, but now
Yeah.
this time I was,
Yeah.
we were both kind of going after God, and God connected us, and we got married, and then we went to England for 2 years to study further. So I did a master's degree in theology there, and then we moved to the Philippines, our first call in ministry to the international church. So I've kind of had a couple boomerang experiences where God's brought me back to a place a second time. That happened in Princeton, that happened in Philippines. So I don't know. What's that about? I don't know. But this is my second time in the Philippines. We're serving the international church. We have 4 children, and we love it. We love living here in this crazy life and unpredictable life that I've lived.
So just give us a quick glimpse of what life is like in the Philippines. I mean, is it like, I think we have ideas as Americans, and you probably know this, growing up in Montana, but like everyone's on a scooter and it's all crowded and there's probably smog and,
Oh, yeah.
what is it like?
Yeah. This is a well, it's a diverse country, meaning there's different, very different snapshots of the Philippines that you could get. So we live in Metro Manila, and we live in the central business district of the Philippines, of Metro Manila. So it's actually very cosmopolitan. So it's like you're walking around the New York City of Manila. So there's sidewalks, there's high-end stores, there's malls, there's restaurants, there's McDonald's and Burger Kings on every corner, Starbucks. So it would be very familiar on the surface. And everybody speaks English pretty much. Filipinos are excellent in English. So that's a plus for sure. But then there's 7,000 islands in this country. So you can hop a flight, or you can drive 2 hours and be at the beach, and there's beautiful beaches here. It's tropical. It's hot year round. It's hot and hotter. It's humid. So it's all of those things, but it's kind of a mix of culture and all kinds of nationalities here. We have people from 50 different nations in our church.
Wow.
So it's exciting. There's never a dull moment, that's for sure.
Okay.
But it is a developing world as well. So it kind of has that component as well. There's a lot of poverty and a lot of, you'd see that as well if you come visit. So.
And your husband is a pastor, is that correct?
Yes. So he's an associate pastor at an international church where we live, and we've been serving here for 10 years.
Okay. And I want to get back to that, because
yeah.
I think that actually enters, I think, a little bit into the story a little bit later. But so bring us back then so basically I think the reason that we are talking today is because I started talking about my alcohol story. You reached out to me on Substack, where I publish my stuff, and you just kind of you had told me that you had a story, but you weren't ready to share it yet. And I prayed for you, and I was like, hey, when you're ready, that's awesome. I will support when you're ready. And you finally shared that about earlier this spring. And so take us back. I'll link. I have the post linked in the show notes in the description. But tell us your story with alcohol.
Silence. No. Where do we begin?
I was like, wait,
thanks.
We having another attack?
No. We had some tech issues before this. No, I mean, the feeling. It's like, where do I begin? Where do I begin telling the story? Because my story began quite young. And I was, to just kind of share where it all began and then kind of move through my story a little bit. I grew up in the small town of Montana. So I think my parents thought we would be kind of shielded from these kinds of things, but actually it was the opposite. Like I was exposed to alcohol. I think the first sip of alcohol I took was in the 6th grade. So probably like age 12 or so, which is so young. I have 4 kids now. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, I was so young. That was the beginning of kind of now I know the brain science behind it a little bit, which I find really helpful about, alcohol and addiction and what it does to the brain. So those my early pathways were being formed. Like, this is fun. This is exciting. I need this to have fun. Ooh, I want more of this to have fun. So that was my association with fun began then in the 6th grade. And thankfully, I was in sports. So sports always kind of kept me, not veering off too far. But I was driving at age 14 and a half in Montana. I had my car. And so we kind of, there was a party scene in my high school. And so I was definitely socially, I was just very social. And I associated fun with parties and alcohol. So that began then. So that was kind of my high school. It was kind of I was super devoted to sports and did well in school but I also enjoyed having a good time with my friends. And so it was just really kind of the work hard, party hard mentality from a young age. So got through high school and then got to play in college basketball, as I was sharing earlier. And that whole pattern just continued. It was just I actually thought I would go to Princeton and no one would have fun there. And it was nope, it was the opposite. People were super intense with their studies. It was that work hard, play hard mentality. So Yeah, that just continued. I was the one, I was on my basketball team. I was the one that was always coaxing everybody, "Let's go out, let's have a good time, let's drink, let's have fun." So, and I never went out and wouldn't get drunk. It was always like go out to get drunk. It
Yeah.
was very much like overusing alcohol. I
And
had
did
hangovers.
you grow up a Christian?
So I grew up, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So I grew up going to church every Sunday. I grew up in the Methodist tradition, and I'm thankful for that. I mean, my parents really tried to instill in us Christian values, but I wouldn't say that it was translating
Mm.
into my day-to-day life. And when I got to college, it wasn't really a big part of my identity. Like I always believed in God, and I had gone to church every Sunday. Literally, we did not miss a Sunday growing up. That was big for my parents. Like we'd always go as a family. I couldn't hang out with friends on Sundays. We couldn't have sleepovers on Saturday nights. Like it was very much a big part of our family rhythm week to week. But it was really on Sundays. It was like that was a Sunday thing. And then like we were very like in the culture, in the, just what we were doing, the secular culture. So it didn't really penetrate my heart. And I would say that I believed in God. I would say there were probably moments where I prayed to Jesus and accepted Jesus into my heart, but again, there wasn't really a lot of teaching and training and formation around it. So it was just kind of like go to church, receive what we do, but then it didn't translate. So that kind of continued into college. And in fact, when nobody was telling me to go to church, it was kind of like, I think I just won't go.
Right.
And I just stopped going to church in college. So it wasn't until my senior year that there was a Christian group on campus that kind of like I noticed them and I was like, maybe I should just go. Like, and I kind of went on Monday nights and I just kind of reconnected a little bit to my faith, my senior year. But it really wasn't a big part of my college. So even though, yeah, I mean, I kind of grew up with it and I had faith in God, most of my friends probably wouldn't identify me as a Christian in college.
Yeah.
If
And
that makes sense.
and the lifestyle
Yeah.
was just very much like what everyone else was doing.
Yeah. And it was just like, I mean, I call it like suitcase faith. I think I wrote an article about this at some point, but it was like, I would kind of like take out my identity of, a Christian identity, and put it on. I would go to my fellowship group and like really enjoy, the songs and the messages. And it was genuine. It was like, I love these people. I love being around here. But then I would like take off my t-shirt and put it in the suitcase and shove it
Right.
under my bed and go out partying like within like a day later, So it was just kind of very much not a fully integrated into my life. But though the Holy Spirit started to work in my senior year, and my conscience started waking up a little bit.
Were you convicted at that time in your senior year? Like, was there anything where you're like, this drinking thing?
Yes, actually. And this is like leads to my first time of finding freedom. That's part of my story is like, I experienced freedom one time, and that was when I was 23, and then I'm 41 now, and it was 20 years later that I experienced freedom again. So that's part of my story. But yeah, my senior year, I started to, because I had like these newly formed like Christian friends, and they like weren't partying on the weekends. I started to notice that, and I'm like, but I wasn't ready to give it up. I wasn't ready to like do anything different, but I noticed it. I was like, oh, they're not getting drunk, but they're having a good time. But the grip was so strong around me. But then it was after my senior year when I decided to go to Asia, that I just had this, it really was a God sense that like my life is going to change when I move. It was like God plucked me out from because if I would have gone to New York City or Boston or Chicago, I would have continued in that lifestyle. In some ways, I have like a lush personality. Like I was kind of like, if someone would invite me to go and party, it was hard for me to say no. It was just like, so I know that by God's grace, his amazing grace, I'm going like this, like plucking me out of my comfort zone and threw me across the world to a place I knew nobody. I had no family members, no connections, no nothing. Started fresh in this new city after I graduated college. And that was when, so my senior year, it was kind of this sense like everything's going to change next year, so live it up now. And so like my senior year and in between my senior year and moving to Asia, I went on a whirlwind trip with a couple of my girlfriends around Europe, and we just lived it up. I mean, it was I'm not even proud to say, like we were drinking every single night heavily. But it was like this last hurrah. That's what in my mind I was like, this is my last hurrah because my life is going to change. I don't know how, but and it did. And within weeks of moving to Asia that first time, I was on my knees and saying, Jesus, come into my heart and I want to live for you. And I started going back to church. Somebody started discipling me for the first time. And that was like, I had huge gaps in like my understanding of the gospel. I didn't know a lot. Yeah. And it just took that kind of humbling phase of like, bend the knee, ask God for help. And he kept bringing people into my life. And that's when the first time where the question was posed to me in a time of prayer by the Holy Spirit, and it was so clear that I will never forget it. It was like, what is the one thing that is keeping you from seeking me fully? And it was just like alcohol, alcohol. Like I knew it. And it was just, and so the Lord was like in his gentle way was just like, lay it down, like lay it down. And I have chills like as I say that, like, yeah. It was just like, lay it down. So for that year, John, like I went cold turkey. I had come from this like intense party lifestyle, loving alcohol, like loving the party life, loving social. Yeah. I couldn't even imagine my social life without alcohol. It was just like, that's where I was. And God was just like, lay it down. And I did. And I had the best year of my life.
Was it hard to lay I mean, physically, was there any symptoms or was it, did you just feel,
No, physically, no. I mean, there were like, I would call them now, look back and like I had cravings, like, cravings to go and have drinks and stuff. It was really, really closely tied with my social life. So like, I was never like a closet drinker and a lone drinker. It was always social.
Yeah.
So like, it was just so tied and so much wrapped up in my identity that those first few months, I felt like an alien. I was like, how do I even live? Like, how do I even, how do I connect with people? I didn't know how to I forgot. I didn't know if I could even like enjoy life without it because it was always that fun thing, that exciting thing. I looked forward to going out and having drinks with my friends. Yeah. So I remember the very first time that somebody, the first couple weeks I was in the Philippines, my first time, and I had recommitted my life to Christ and had said, okay, Lord, I will lay down alcohol for a season. Somebody invited me to church that next week and somebody was inviting me to the nightclubs. And it was just like, it was like, here you go on a silver platter. Here's choose. Yeah. And I just had this awareness, like, I know what the nightclub scene is like. I can go back there and it'll always be there for me. Mm-hmm. But something called me to kind of do the radical thing and just like start going back to church and like just let go of the nightlife for a little while. And so I did that. And so, but it was, yeah, I remember the first time I actually went out initially and somebody was like, are you drinking? I was like, no, like I couldn't, I couldn't, I didn't even know what to do. It's like, and then I was like, but I know it was like the strength in my weakness, God giving me the strength because it was out of character for me to say no and to decline. So it was just, as it does, it gets easier. But in the beginning it was really hard because it was just so foreign and I didn't know how to be without it.
How long did it take, do you feel like, for you to for it to feel normal to not drink?
Well, and now that I'm going through it a second time and just hit my 1 year mark.
Yeah.
I really think like it takes probably at least 6 months, like at least for me it did. And then physically you start feeling great and then you have more energy and you feel like, I mean, for me, creativity is linked to drinking.
Amen.
So in both cases, like the first time God kind of like called me as a writer, like in that first time of being free and as a creator. And I was like, yeah. So, but yeah, 6 months to a year, I would say. I mean, for me, maybe I don't know if that sounds like a long time or not a long time, but like,
I think it differs.
yeah,
You
I
know?
think, yeah, I think,
But I tell people it probably will take a little longer than you think, you know?
yeah, it does. And I think there's like, we don't talk about this a lot. And I've talked to Christy a little bit about it, but like, cause I'm trained now as a grief coach. And so I walk with people through grief.
And by
And
the way,
like,
Christy is our friend Christy Osborne, who's been on
yes,
on the podcast, Love Life
shout
Sober.
out.
Yes,
Yeah.
love her.
Shout out to Christy. She's part of my later story, which we'll get to, but
Yeah.
and helping me find freedom a second time. But yeah, there's like an element of like grieving, of losing something, you know, and you go
100%.
through this process of like,
100%.
this was like a huge part of me and now I've lost it. And so you have to, for me, I feel like the grief, acknowledging that is an important part. And there's like layers of it, which I've experienced again for the second time.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's normal, but it's like, there is this real sense of like sadness of like the change, and you're stepping into something new and it's uncertain, and you're letting go of something that you kind of like strangely found comfort in for so long, and strangely felt like yourself in for so long, that like you're completely like dying. There's a death, right?
100%.
And like resurrection's on the other side of that. We know that, but like there's a death.
We'll be right back after this. You know, what I'm hoping that people listening to this, what I'm hoping you hear is like, and that don't be ashamed of that. Like in a sense of like, grieve it. I had to grieve it. Like I've met people who unhealthily never grieve it. And because they're like, I'm not supposed to feel like, listen, it had a grip on you. Okay.
Yes.
Like grieve, like it was there. Listen, alcohol was there for me in a lot of ways.
Yes.
You know, like it didn't talk back to me, you know, it didn't tell me, X, Y, and Z.
Me.
Yeah. Right. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like,
yeah.
So grieve it. And I think that's really healthy. So, bring us now then to, okay, so you give it up for a year, but then you go back to the States and you get married, and like, when does alcohol start kind of creeping back?
Enter back in. Yeah. Yeah. Because you look back and I was like, I really did experience freedom for the first time, like major. And it was like a transformative experience. Like started reading my Bible for the first time, filled with the Spirit in kind of tangible ways, and like was in a community that was just vibrant and just like running hard after God. And it was an exciting time. It was in my 20s. It was like, you know, I was on a career path in broadcast journalism at that time. And alcohol was just, it could have been a huge part of my life, but it just wasn't. Like I just had totally broken free. And I realized that actually I have more fun having deep conversations in a coffee shop rather than trying to shout across like music in a nightclub. Like I had these like realizations, like actually I'm more wired for this. This is how God created me, for depth and conversation and meaning and connection. You know, so I had those like revelations along the way, and it just kind of furthered me along in that. And then, it was kind of like moved to back to Princeton and was working with college students and could see even the detrimental and devastating effects of alcohol. Like from that perspective, I was like, I'm free now. I'm like running after God now, but I'm ministering to these college girls who were just, you know, just so caught up in the hookup culture, the drinking scene, everything that I was before. So it was really cool how God allowed me to go back and like minister to the very girls that I was, you know, just several years earlier. So during that time, I meet my husband, my now husband. He was studying in seminary, and I mean, he was part of a tradition. He too had a past of abusing alcohol. He was in a fraternity, went to a major. He's from Alabama, like, you know, Southerner through and through, and just caught up in that scene of like college, Alabama. He was a Roll Tide, you know.
Yep.
And so that was his background. And he also had a radical like transformation experience in his 20s. So we met at that time, and we both were kind of like coming out of that. And he was called to the ministry, and he was like an unlikely, like, what? You became a pastor? Like his friends were like, that was the reaction, because he that was not what anyone would have anticipated. So God got a hold of him, called him through the Alpha course. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Alpha
Yeah.
course. Um, came to Christ and then called to ministry. So we met up. And it was at that time where we started going on dates. He really pursued me in like such a sweet way. And it was refreshing, and we would go on dates, and I've noticed like he would be having a beer, or like he would be, he would have a couple beers at dinner. And I was just like, oh, like he's totally like he's free from alcohol, but it's like the, 1 Corinthians, I think it's 10, 3, or that verse that's like everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. And so there's
Right.
this like freedom around like he can, and I just noticed that, and I was like, that's interesting. Like, because I had kind of swung the other way. It was like Christians don't drink, like I was kind of in that, like I was not Christian before, but now I'm Christian, and like, but I didn't grow up in a tradition that alcohol was seen that way. But it was just kind of that's kind of what I took on, is like
Yeah.
Christians don't drink. And so then when he was having a beer, I was like, oh, like he's demonstrating to me that you actually can. It doesn't have to be like getting drunk. Like I was kind of learning like from him, like you can have this very like measured. So like I'm like, oh, I'll start like having a glass of wine at dinner, or like, I'd have a beer with him. And so it was just kind of became something that like on our date night, or during that phase of dating, like we would just enjoy having a meal and having a drink, but it was never more than that. Never more than 2 drinks. But it just kind of slowly entered back in, and I was like, okay, I can do this. It really wasn't, I didn't think much of it. Other than I kind of liked that he was demonstrating to me that, and it wasn't an issue for him. Like he had left the drunkenness behind, and it was just, something fun, fun and relaxing, but there was still that association, it was still.
Did you feel any, like, was there any kind of check, in your heart, like when you started again, or were you like, no, like at that point there was freedom, I felt fine about it? Like, what was what do you feel like truly was going on inside?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I definitely like observed it. Like I was like, when we first like, started dating, like and then we got serious. We dated for a year, and then we're engaged. So it was like, I definitely observed it, and I was like, but it was kind of like an informed. And I remember like even like I'm sure I like prayed about it and was just like, but so I wouldn't say it was like a check in my spirit, but it was definitely like, is this what I want to do? But then I was like, it's fine. It was, so I kind of was like, just, experimenting with it, I guess. Because alcohol really had not been a part of my life for so long at that point. So it seemed harmless, I think.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, I'm choosing to enter into sin. Like, it wasn't like that. It was just like, interesting. Like, I'll test this out. Like,
yeah.
And then it was like, it was fine. And like, I would say it was fine. Like, not knowing that for me personally, the door was opening back up to something.
Yeah.
But like, I didn't see it that way at the time. It was like, well, I'm just an adult living. I'm a committed Christian. I love the Lord. Like, we're going into a life of ministry, and you might relate to this, or maybe some listeners who are in ministry, but sometimes ministry can feel like pressurized. So you almost look for ways to like relax, you almost look for ways to not be so serious. And I think there was a component, because it was my first call to ministry when I worked as a campus minister. And I was always like in the depths with college students, and and there's times when you just sort of like want to not be so serious. That's like the human side, is like, I just need to like relax, and and so, and Noah, my husband, was really, he was like my comfort, and his very name means like rest and comfort. And so we would just kind of like, and it really wasn't around the alcohol, but it was just kind of like looking for I guess for me, just having ways to kind of like relax and not be so serious all the time was a tendency I was already noticing.
And I also,
but this is all in hindsight.
Yeah, and I talked about this in my book, is that
yeah.
I think there is a way to view alcohol on the East Coast that's very interesting. And I think different regions of the country,
Definitely.
from Wisconsin, right? Like the drunkest state in the union, the drunkest counties, right? Yes. But then there's this interesting part, I think, in about how wine especially is viewed on the East Coast. It's kind of like a sophisticated unwind, like every,
Definitely.
I was, we'd go to a small group in New York City and everyone would bring a bottle of wine. Like you just did. Right?
Yes.
And so there's almost kind of like this East Coast sophistication unwind mentality that you're then battling and grappling with.
Absolutely. And that's spot on. And that's kind of what it was. And we moved to England after that. And our church and Christy Arsborn, our friend, would tell you, who lives in England, it's very much a part of the culture there. And like churches serve wine, they serve port and sherry. They at our seminary college that we studied at, there was always dinners where wine and all those little pre and post dinner drinks were being served. It was not a thing to even think twice about seeing alcohol at a Christian event in England. The public houses, the pubs, was a very big part of the social scene. So when we moved there, we got married and moved there, it was just like, you just kind of like fold in to the culture. So that's a really good point, that different places in the world and different parts of the United States have different cultures around and levels of acceptance, even in Christian circles, around drinking.
So okay, so you kind of then and you talking about moving to England. So alcohol is now, like, what would you say your relationship with alcohol is at this point in your life? Like, is it now just a glass of wine at dinner? Is it like, where does anything start creeping in? Or maybe there's no drunkenness, but yet there's a conviction. What kind of starts to happen?
Yes. Yeah, when I look back on that, I mean, I was a high and hyper, like, regulator, I think you could say. Like, I was very like, okay, like, we can have I was ever managing, like, we couldn't go to the pub like 3 days a week. It only could be 2. Like, and if it was 2, you have 2 pints. You can't have 3 pints. Like, it was always, I was always making sure that it was like, it was like, it was in
fit
like
into a box in a way.
Yeah, kind of. And as long as the beast stayed tame. I mean, again, this is in hindsight, so like I can see this now. I didn't even know the extent to which it was taking up mental real estate, like heart real estate. Like, I didn't even know at the time. But like, I look back on that, and I was ever like, my husband would be like, "Oh, we can go to the pub tonight." I'm like, "No, we're gonna go on Friday because that's our pub night. Like, not like every night." Like, I was really aware of not letting it go every night. So I think it was just, so that tells me that I think, there was management around it. So I knew that if I let it get to an every night thing, I was very aware, like, if you drink more, the more you drink, the more you're going to want to drink. So like, I tried to keep it tame. So it wasn't a level of conviction like, oh, we shouldn't be doing this, or we're sinning, or we're hiding from something. No, not at all. It was like, we were just having our Friday night at the pub. We'd have our fish and chips and our pint, and then like really go home. It wasn't like we were doing anything wrong, or like at all, by standards of where we were living, and just by, if you observed, we were just doing what every average person would do, very much within like a reasonable place. So I wouldn't say I had conviction at that point, but I was managing it so it wouldn't get to a point. So there was like already quite a lot of management around it.
And I think you bring up a good point too. And I know this is in hindsight, but it's an important hindsight, which is all of that management takes up a lot of real estate.
Yeah.
Right? Like, in your mind and in your heart. And I think, one of the most important things that I hope people get when they read my book, and I think when they read your story as well, is that it's not about the amount of alcohol you're drinking.
Yeah.
Like, you can realize that you have, and I love, how you talk about this, because you use St. Augustine as well, but you can have a disordered love.
Yes.
And it's not something that looks like a quote unquote traditional addiction, right?
Yes, right.
So talk about that aspect a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I discovered that you had framed like we use similar framing in some of our the way that
Yeah,
we talk about our
yeah.
story. Yeah, cuz that's what it was for me. Like it just it was ever trying to like tame this love. But then like realizing that my relationship with alcohol was more um it was more what do you call it? Like it was more entangled than I thought it was.
Mm.
And like if you think about like week to week, like I would never miss a trip to the pub when we were living in England. Like we would never miss a date night without having some drinks. Like it was definitely a fixture in our week. But it was like it was being tamed. So but when I started to realize, it wasn't until like my mom died in 2017, I kind of had some things that happened later on once I started having kids. And my mom died, and I realized that I was kind of like using alcohol in a more pronounced way than I ever wanted to be again, and realized that I actually, even if I wanted to stop, I didn't know that I could.
What did
Um,
that look like when you say you were using it in a more pronounced way than you wanted to? What did that look like?
well, like you know, after I first noticed it after my mom died. We were very, very close. She got cancer and fought a 3-year battle, and it was just very unexpected for our family. She was a very healthy person, and so that was like a big bamboozle in my life. That was the
Mm,
first person that I lost to death.
mm,
That was really close to me. Of course, it's your mom. We talked every day on the phone. That same year, I had become a mom, so like I was entering into motherhood when my mother was going
uh,
to be with the Lord. So it was just this like great exchange, like becoming a mom and then having
yeah.
my mom leave the earth was pretty intense. And it was tough. And so I remember going to a wedding a few months after my mom died, and my daughter was, I think, 8 months old. I flew across the world, went to this wedding of my dearest friend. I was in the wedding, and I had a babysitter for the wedding. And I was like, I just, they kept topping up my glass, and I let them. And that was the first time that I experienced like a hangover the next day. And the shame was just like so
Mm,
palpable. And yeah, I overdid it. I just kind of was like, I was in this place in my heart that was just like, I don't care. Like,
yeah.
I just need something. Like, I need this. I need this.
I
Like,
need the escape, the numbing.
and I let myself. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, yeah, I was going through a tough time, but like, that was the first time that I was like, wow, this is interesting. Cause like, I could sometimes step back and be like, I thought I was free from this, but now I'm like turning to it again. So yeah, it was, so that's what, you know, that's just one snapshot. But then like having kids kind of going, I've had 4 kids in the last 10 years. So like 8 years. So you can imagine like, you know, I'm either like pregnant or nursing somebody you
Right.
know, for the last 8 years. And it's been the greatest joy of my life. But it has been a little bit of a yo-yo and like a roller coaster. Like I'm pregnant, not drinking, and then I, you know, give birth, and I'm like, woohoo! Like I can have my, you know, have my glass of wine or whatever. You know, it's just kind of like a yo-yo. So that was like a whole nother phase. We can talk more about that. But yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm kind of rambling, but
No, this is great because I think, it kind of brings us to you just described well. I think the yo-yo is a good aspect of it, right?
yeah,
As someone who
yeah,
had given up and then it creeps back in and then you start making compromises or you start making decisions that you don't want
mm-hmm,
to, and it's back and
mm-hmm.
forth, it's back and forth. How do you get to the point then where, and there's way more details in your post, but where does our friend Christy enter the story? You have the story about your 40th birthday as well. Like,
Yeah,
where do you kind of get to the point where you're back to where you're like, oh no,
yeah,
this, to go back to one of the original questions, this is
yeah.
disordered.
Yeah. disordered. Yeah. Um, so I was 32 when, just to give some like timestamps on it, like I was 32 when my mom died, at 32 when I had my first child. And I was 41 when I found freedom again from alcohol. So, so it kind of was just like for several years there. It was just like the yo-yo because I would be pregnant and experience like, oh, this is great. Like I feel like being pregnant was the only thing that would actually like help me to like just completely get alcohol out of my life. So for the 9 months, it was just like, this is awesome. And my husband would, the second, third, and fourth child, he went in solidarity with me. So we would like have this like amazing time. And we were both like, should we even go back to drinking? Like we would have that like conversation and then we like would, but like we were like, this is amazing. Like, so we'd have that
Yeah.
experience 4 times, and so then you have, I had my precious babes and, loved being a mom, loved being a parent, loved, everything about it. But I did have this sense of like, I earned this, celebrate, celebration was
Yeah.
closely tied with alcohol.
Yep.
So I would kind of go into a phase of like, again, highly regulated, but like, hey, at New Year's Eve, I can have champagne and I can, after coming off of the 9 months of, giving your body to something else, you kind of feel like, woo, liberation.
Right.
So it really was that kind of mentality, like liberation, like, and it was never like getting drunk or anything like that, but it was just kind of like turning like this, the disordered love of just kind of like loving it a little too much and like wanting it a little too much. And like, I started noticing at one point, like, so it was our rhythm of our year is that we work 6 days a week here, and then we work year round, and then for 5 weeks in the summer we go home to our home country, and it's called home leave, and you basically just go for 5 weeks, and we stay with our families, and have an incredible time in the U.S. Over the years, like the summertime, my husband's family has a lake house. So we're out on the boat. We're doing the lake thing. My family lives in Montana in the mountains. There's definitely like a cocktail hour like every night. Like it's just like we're home. We're connecting with home. And like it's just fun. But like there's a cocktail hour as a part of it, So we just kind of get into this, over the years for our summer breaks, we would kind of go home and just like alcohol would kind of be a part of our trip. So it was 2021 when it was after the pandemic. We hadn't gone home the previous year, so we were going home this year. My dad got remarried that summer. So there was a lot of emotions around it. And I had that summer where I was like, alcohol has a grip on me. Like it's too much. And I felt so much shame. I talk a lot about how shame just kept me quiet for a long time. I didn't feel like I could talk about it with anybody. Like it was just that shame just silenced me. And like I was still working in ministry. I was still doing a lot of stuff, but I just had this area of my life that I didn't feel great about. And I felt a lot of shame around it because I already knew what freedom felt like. So it was 2021 that summer was kind of just like, oh, this is like, I kind of had that awareness. But I feel like the Lord, I don't know, in his gentleness and kindness, I don't know, I feel like this is how it's been when God's calling me to kind of like look at something. It's very gentle. Like he opens my eyes, but like it's very like it wasn't
not beating you over the head.
It wasn't God like stop this now or like because I wasn't like outwardly, it wasn't. Yeah, I kind of ping pong back and forth. Was like this is a problem. It's not a problem. It's a problem. It's not a problem. And so, that 2021, but then 2022, I was pregnant with my fourth. So that was out the summer. And then 2023 was where I was like, I remember talking to a girlfriend on the phone and she was just like, Allie, you don't seem like yourself. And I was like, I know. And I just was like, I knew that alcohol was part of it because I just felt like it was getting in the way of my relationship with God. It was getting in the way with my sense of confidence, my sense of calling, my sense of everything. Like it was getting in the way. And I finally was so again, it was just like an awareness, but I wasn't really doing anything yet to change it.
How do you, let me pause there because how do you describe to someone who's saying, oh, okay, you guys, you're not getting drunk. There's nothing wrong with your drinking. You're just overly sensitive. Like, what do you mean it was getting in the way?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I always talk a lot about, like, you have an external life and then you have the internal, right? And so, like, if you were to flip me inside out at that point, I mean, everything looked okay on the outside, but I was like kind of a mess on the inside. Like, I was feeling like the shame. There was guilt. There was like, I was just like, I don't want to be living this life. Like, and there was one point where God kind of gave me this picture of like eating breadcrumbs off of a table. It was like, I'm entering back into like the joy and the quality of life. I'm eating breadcrumbs, and I'm like, I know there's this other. I know that God called us to this life of joy and abundance and like fully serving him and feeling like totally clear in your conscience, totally clear in that freedom. That's what it feels like. Peace. You feel like there's no barriers. You're throwing off, everything that hinders. You're just like running your race, and you're heading in the right direction. I knew that was possible and I'd experienced it, but I kind of had gone back to this like breadcrumbs mentality. Like I'm seeking the drink and like I'm going to the drink to find joy again. And like I'm feeling really depressed when like the drinking is over and it has to be a whole nother week until I'm going to get to do that again. Like it was kind of like, I don't know. I just knew that it had kind of like somehow taken up more space and my love for it had grown. And so that's what I mean. It was getting in the way, and that clouds your mind. That clouds your thoughts. That clouds your emotions. That affects everything, right? Like when you feel like all the gunk and the funk, it was just like gunk. And I felt foggy. I didn't feel clear. There was no creativity flowing in my life. Okay, I have to say, I had babies. I had little kids. I was kind of in that phase. I'm still in the trenches of parenthood. I have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 8-year-old. So I'm very much still in the trenches. But like, yeah, so that I have to say that because, most people would be like, well, yeah, you feel foggy when you're, you have 4 kids. And but like, it was an added level because there was this piece that I didn't feel good about it. And I wasn't really addressing it, but the Lord was like putting his finger on it, like, look at this, you need to look at this again.
See, and that's why I like to talk, I don't make any qualms about my book, audiences, Christians mainly. And because I think you and I, and hopefully people listening to this, I mean, if you're not a Christian, I'm so glad you're listening. Like, awesome. Please keep listening. But I'm not going to be shocked if some of this doesn't make sense to you, because I think we can talk about this in a way that non-Christians can't. And what I mean by that is I think what you're talking about is it comes back to James 4:17, which is like, if we know what's right and we don't do it, it's sin, right? And so if the Lord hasn't called us to just do the bare minimum. Right? Like the Lord hasn't just called us like just to not get drunk, right? There's plenty of people that he's called that says, I want you to give this up because I have this X, Y, and Z that's better for you, right? And so what I'm not saying, I don't think you're saying, is that no Christian can drink, but by goodness, if the Lord is telling you to give it up, you are going to feel foggy. You don't have to be like you don't have to be getting drunk every night to feel foggy. Like if he's telling you to give it up, like you got to give it up.
Not. Yes,
exactly. No wonder you're foggy, right?
Yeah.
So I that kind of goes back to the earlier question of the disordered love. It's like the disordered love can look like it can look a variety of ways. And for you, the disordered love was, I'm being told to give this up. This has a hold on my heart. I'm not getting drunk. I'm not doing X, Y, and Z, but if I keep running away from what the Lord's telling me to do, I'm going to feel this way.
Yes,
and I'm going to continue
absolutely.
to feel this way.
And I think, and it really was, sometimes we do have things in our lives that we for whatever reason, we don't feel like we can address yet. And, there's timing to things and it was a couple of years. But at the same time, God gives us, free will and choice, and like, he's working with us, but like I knew that he was kind of tapping my my shoulder for a couple of years, and I just wasn't ready to face it.
Mm,
And I didn't have the tools. I didn't have, I have to be like compassionate on myself because
yeah.
I didn't have the tools. I didn't have what I know now. And so God brought people into my life, which brings me to, kind of my 40th birthday. I knew that, so this was 2024 or 3. Um, and it was my 40th birthday, and I was like, and the Lord, and I was kind of coming back into like seeking the Lord, really in the Word, really praying, like, and it was just like the Holy Spirit's prompting, like, you need to share this with Kate and Kelsey. Like, those were my best friends, my dear soul friends, my soul sisters, we call each other. And so I flew to California to see them. We had this amazing time. And at the end of it, I like had to kind of eke out the words like, guys, I have a confession. And like, they were like, huh? Like, what is she going to say? And I was like, I just think that alcohol has become a bigger part of my life than I want it to be. I think I need to look at my relationship with alcohol again. And I was just like, to eke out those words, it felt, it felt so hard. Like
Yeah.
I almost could not do it. Like it was, and like, why? I mean, I guess for me, it's like you fear judgment. You feel like you're going to be misunderstood. You feel like they're going to think the worst of you. And this is what happens in the church, right? I share your passion and your heart to want to, bring this into the church in a sense of like, this
Yeah.
is what sanctification is. This is
Yes,
what the
yes,
life
yes.
of discipleship is. We have to put it in the broader context of discipleship, is that we have seasons where our temptation is this, or we get pulled in that way. It's this fallen world that we have to kind of keep kind of whacking at it like whack-a-mole, kind of whack-a-mole. And
Yes.
we need community to be able to do that, not these stigmas around these certain things. And so I just think, as I've reflected on that, I think that for a couple years, like I was in a couple of accountability groups. I have a women's Bible study that meets weekly. I could not share this. I couldn't share it.
Mm.
I was just so I was cloaked in shame. Like, it's just how it felt. I just felt like
Such a tool of the devil. Like
I
the
can't.
shame. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I can't share this. Like, it felt, and it just, and that's out of like, it's out of, I mean, it was like way bigger in my mind than it should have been. But like, yeah, that's a tool of the enemy for sure. Like, so keeping me silent, keeping me quiet, not talking. But after I made that confession, it was like, I felt lighter. I felt like there was hope. They just came around me. They loved on me. They were just like, you're going to get through this. God's going to be with you. Like, they were just like really supportive and like really loving. So then my friend who I confessed to, she was like, "Oh, and by the way, my cousin, Christy, is like a sober coach, and she's like gone through this whole transformation. She's writing now. She's going to publish a book." And I was like, "Christy?" Like, I had met Christy years and years ago, but like before she was a Christian. And I was just like, that is so cool. Like, I was so happy for her. But then I was also like, oh my, like, but I was just like, I don't know, I couldn't imagine myself even like reaching out to her, because it was like still this like scary thing. But long story short, like I did reach out to her on Instagram, and I was like, I just was observing what she was doing on Instagram. And then she direct messaged me and say, "Hey, Allie, I see." I was
I
like,
see
oh
you
no.
creeping on me.
I know. I'm like, no, I was supposed to be like, I literally was just going to like be observing for a while, like from a distance. And she like got in there and she was like, "Hey, Allie." So I was
Called you
like,
out of the shadows.
yeah, exactly. So, and it was just, we had a call like the next week, and she was just like, "Hey," and like, and we talked about, and I said, and this was around where the Lord, I feel like, put on my heart to do a 40-day fast in the new year. January 8th was when I started. That's my date, my significant date, January 8th, 2024. So yeah, it was 2023 was when we connected. And she was like, "Oh, funny, I'm writing a book called The 40-Day Alcohol Fast. And so like, do you want to be an early reader for me? And then we'll exchange some coaching sessions." It was great. It was just like we worked something out, and I got to read her the early draft of her book, which I did for the 40 days. And that's really what helped me find freedom, is having that resource, meditating on scripture, inviting the Spirit into it, reflecting all the questions, just really trying to understand my own relationship with alcohol that I had never done before. Like, I had never really looked at my disordered and dysfunctional relationship with alcohol.
Yep.
I have alcoholism in my family. I have all kinds of things. I have siblings who have been ravaged by alcohol. And like, I've always been the one that's like kind of been the moderator. Like, so I had never really looked into it. But really looking into it, I could see like, yeah, I have a dysfunctional relationship with alcohol, and I don't want this a part of my life. It's a snare for me. It's like the Bible uses the term like a snare, like it'll actually trip you up. And that is just, for me, that is what alcohol is. It's a snare, and it will trip me up. And if I choose to go back to it, it's going to be a matter of time before it's just gets back in there and makes an idol of my heart, essentially.
Yeah. We'll be right back after this.
So I think
it's an addictive substance. Yeah.
Yeah, that Christy is so good about talking about, and you talk about this in your piece, and I think it's good to bring up here, which is, obviously, so my book is called Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic, right? And so I use the term alcoholic. I don't, and I there's a whole chapter in my book where I talk about, why actually that's not the best term, but my joke is like, Confessions of a Christian with Alcohol Use Disorder isn't a catchy title, and it doesn't sell books, and it doesn't help people find freedom. But you talked about like, because you couldn't and didn't meet the, what I would say is the old definition of alcoholic.
Yeah.
That in a sense that kept you maybe stuck for a little longer. And Christy is great about, if you don't want to use labels, don't use labels. Yeah. But talk about maybe to the person who's listening, who's like, well, yeah, I'm not getting drunk. I'm not meeting I don't meet any old definition, new definition. How do you navigate the terminology in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think so there's like a couple different ways I want to approach the answer to this question, because the first thing is like, as I've learned more about alcohol and like the effects on the brain and the body, like there's an addiction piece in here. I mean, that I have to acknowledge, my body and my brain was addicted to the feeling of relief that I got from alcohol. There's a chemical thing happening. And there's actually chemicals being released as I drink that I wasn't really aware that was happening. So, I do think that alcohol is a highly addictive substance. And so we can't just remove the word addiction from the conversation, because it is addictive in nature, right? Yeah. Anytime, and it can be any number of things. Food, it can be, watching things. It can be pornography. All these things, we know that there's something going on in the brain that keeps us going back because it releases dopamine. So we know that now. There's a lot of research, thankfully, out on that now. And so we can be aware of that. So I definitely think there's I'm not afraid to use the word addiction. I think we all have addictive tendencies, and maybe to varying degrees and maybe to different things. So I think we have to learn how to get comfortable talking about that in the church. We all have addictions that we need to
Yes.
But would I necessarily term myself an alcoholic? No, I wouldn't. And I know that's kind of an old way of doing it now. And there's new stuff on that now. But so the way that I see it is, I think when we're really in a space, I can see a direct correlation, honestly, with my relationship with God and my actions. I wasn't really, for several years, I've kind of been in a little bit of a wilderness spiritually. I didn't have my seeking practices. I was reading my Bible and praying, but I feel just in this last year, I'm kind of getting back to a place of what what the Bible calls, and what I've heard you talk about is abiding. That's one of your things, is really abiding and getting up in those early morning hours, structuring your whole life around being with your Lord. And having that kind of intimacy with God where we're opening ourselves up to him. I write a lot about the heart in the spiritual life, that it's really about what's in our heart, and that God will reveal the things of our heart, even the hidden sins and iniquities. And that we open ourselves up, and then the Holy Spirit give him permission really to kind of like point those things out, and then we get to repent of those things and we get to turn away from them. And so I would just say, for me, that's what the dysfunctional side of alcohol was, just like that. When I'm spending time with the Lord and I'm saying, God, search my heart, just whatever is in my life that is either like on a throne and it shouldn't be, whatever is like somehow disordered and it shouldn't be, like, show me that, Lord. And I open myself up. And the Holy Spirit is so faithful and so gentle and so kind to kind of just like show me those things. And so it's like, God, I want to let go of this alcohol thing. I don't want this to be having a grip on my heart. I don't want this anymore. I give it up to you. I turn from it. I repent from it. And then there's this whole process that, helped me to kind of actually get free. But that's how I would frame it, is just kind of like things in our lives that we live in a fallen world. We live in a dark world. We're constantly being bombarded by different messages, and we can easily get sidetracked, distracted, off track, and so we need to go back to that secret place with God where he's able to we're getting quiet enough where he can point out those things. So for me, it's definitely like in the context of discipleship and sanctification, as you say. It's like, it's a lifelong thing. Like, I'm not saying I'm free from alcohol forever. I mean, I hope that I can ditch it once and for all. But like, this is a part of my journey, my spiritual journey. And it's a long game. It's a marathon. It's not like a sprint, like, okay, check, that's done. Like, I already know that it can come back into my life.
Yeah.
Just like anything else. And so it's like, it's a discipleship. It's the journey of discipleship, the long obedience in the same direction. That's what Eugene Peterson says. And it's just that idea that and we're with community, we're with others, and like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Hey, I'm struggling with that. Like, hey, I'm really, I'm having lustful thoughts about another man. Like, I need to confess that. Like, whatever it is, like having a community where you feel safe and where you feel like I can actually you have to discern who those people are in your life. Yeah. But having that trusting environment. And so for me, this is like, yeah, it's not like I need to say I'm an addict, but I'm like that. In the context of my spiritual journey, like, alcohol is not a healthy thing for me right now. So it just, it's a snare in my path. And I'm aware of that now. And so, yeah, I'm going after God without it.
The last thing I want to ask you about, in this, hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn here, but there was, when you and I first started talking about this topic, I think I invited you on the podcast, or you had talked about writing the piece, and I'd encouraged you to write it. And I think there was some trepidation, knowing that, like, hey, the church struggles with this. Like this, like I say, they love stories of salvation, but they don't know what to do with stories of sanctification, especially messy sanctification. And you're like, and I think you just had to, in the good sense of the word, is like, you're like, I have to count this isn't your term, this is my term. But you're like, I have to count the cost. Like, my husband's a pastor, we're in ministry here in the Philippines. And so explain to me how you got to the point and what you had to then finally kind of conclude and realize that why are you telling your story now?
Yeah, I mean, well, Substack has opened me up to a whole world, first of all. I mean, I haven't felt like I wanted to go out on the mountaintops and like necessarily proclaim it. It's kind of been a very private and like intimate thing for me. And like, just, my few good friends know about it, but it's like, I didn't seek out like telling my story, but at the same time, I've gained courage and knowing that I think I can fall into the like image management, thing of Christianity, especially in ministry. And like, I feel like God has called us to be, to walk in humility and to walk in just like complete integrity with what's happening. And so I've always been a person, like an open book, like sharing what God does in my life so that others may benefit. It's always, I've always been an open book. But I don't know, I guess this one feels like now that I'm over the hump. I couldn't talk about it for a while because when you're going through something, it's like you have to go through it with the Lord. You have to go through it with your trusted people. And then like once God brings you to the other side, then I think there's a discernment and like a timing to share our things, especially in leadership. I wouldn't just air this in the middle of it and like, whoa, I don't know. Like, but now that I'm through it, I can actually say God delivered me. I'm testifying. We have to testify. It is by his grace and his strength that he brought me to this place. So why would I not share it? Right. I mean,
Right.
So there's that. But yeah, I mean, I definitely had it. This is like my second time sharing on a podcast. So it's kind of like working out, like, and you don't often know what your story is until God like helps you articulate it. Right. And so like when you messaged me, I had written my note on Substack. It was like on notes. It was like, January 8th was my 1 year of like being alcohol free. And I didn't set out to like be alcohol free, but I was like, wow, I made it to a year. Like, and so I shared and I was like, I'm thankful for the people who helped me to get here. And of course to God. And then that's when you reached out and I was like, yeah, I know God's going to call me to like write a piece about it. But I like kept putting it off because it just felt so like, it's like you have to put it into words, and you don't know. I've written one, I have one little measly book that I wrote like a million years ago. So I know the writing process of like God writes through you as you do it, and so I knew that I had to sit down, get my bum in the chair and like just do it with the Lord, and kind of wrestle it out. And so I did that. And it was hard work. It was like, I mean, part of it flowed out, but part of it was like, wanting to self-protect and preserve and, but like wanting to be vulnerable at the same time and like, wrestling through the fears and like, so all of that. So, but I finally got to a point where it was like, I wrote the piece and pressed send. It was kind of like, like, but like, you know what? I was so encouraged by the response, like, people in my community and then also people just like, on Substack and the social media and stuff are like, people love real stories, they love human stories. And I think even in Christian leadership, of course, discerning the time and discerning it, but testifying to those ways that God has brought you to further levels of sanctification in your journey and, growing. And we're called to maturity. We're called to wholeness. We're called to holiness. We're called to all these things. So it's like, it's a process. And so we need to testify, not just like, okay, I've arrived. Like no, we never arrive. We are ever walking step by step with the Lord. And there's different things that are going to come in to different degrees. And hopefully it doesn't have to be like huge snares, but there are times where we just get tripped up. And so it's helped me to kind of understand it that way. So yeah, I did have a little bit of fear and a little bit of trepidation, but like, I think what I'm learning is that as I'm more authentic and kind of real and like, of course, using wisdom, like I feel like God, God is glorified in that. Like God is glorified and it's not about me. It's not about my image. It's not about any of that. It's about Jesus, like living in us and making himself, be glorified through it all, through our mess, through our muck. And look at throughout the scriptures, all of our biblical heroes are like people who just like messed up a lot. We just studied the life of Abraham in our church and it was just like, oh my goodness, like
that dude was it was like, they talk about him being in the Hall of Faith. That dude had a hard time trusting,
I mean, yeah. So it's kind of like putting all this on a level to like, we are human and God is God and he's walking with us through these things. But yeah, it's still, sometimes feels scary, feels risky. I still struggle with like worrying about what others think or what, but I have to also give that over, and just surrender that and just say, testifying to your goodness, Lord, your power.
Well, I am so glad that you did write that piece. I think there are a lot of people who are very glad you wrote that piece. And, you've been talking about your Substack. If people do want to read, I'll link that piece, but if they want to read more about what you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, I think right now I'm most active on my Substack publication, Homes of Glory. So you can find me there. Also, my Instagram, Allie Kennedy Live, is where you can find me. So, yeah, I would love to connect with anyone. I don't know if anything spoke to anyone, but it's just kind of like these are my.
I know it did.
In some ways, I feel like it's a second draft of of communicating in these things. So thanks for allowing me to come on and just share.
I'm
a
glad
bit.
we were one of those early readers, if you will, of one of these early drafts. That's so that I do not take that lightly. Allie, thank you so much for sharing your story, for making this happen on the literally the other side of the world. Like, you are 12 hours away.
I know.
It's like as opposite as we can get. And so I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I can't wait to hear how other people are blessed by your story, because I know I have been. So thank you for the courage to tell it.
Thanks, John. Thanks for your questions too. Appreciate it.
Here is my hope for you after listening to that podcast. My hope for you is that you will take Allie's story and use it as permission to be curious and ask questions about the things you're doing that maybe the Holy Spirit has started knocking on your heart about, where you don't feel like you have to label it, or you don't have to make some big admission. Now, maybe you need to, right? Like 2 weeks before I hit my rock bottom, I finally admitted I was an alcoholic. Like, I needed to do that, right? But maybe the whole point of why you're listening to this or hearing this is that there is something in your life that the Holy Spirit has been prompting you about and that you have been ignoring. And maybe Allie's story is the permission you need to say, you know what? I listened to that, and I realize that I need to take this seriously. And maybe it gives you permission to have a conversation with your friends or your loved ones or your spouse to say, listen, I know this may seem odd, but I want to talk to you about my fill in the blank. And I'm not trying to alarm you, but I feel like the Holy Spirit has been putting this on my heart. Like, I just hope that this podcast is your permission to do that. And so I thank Allie for telling her story, because I think it's an important story in what I will call the addiction space. And even though she was not fall down drunk all the time, it is important that those of us who are getting that prompting start asking those questions sooner rather than later, and before we get to that point. I can't remember if I've said this on a podcast, but as I'm developing some of these thoughts into something bigger, which I will reveal to you soon enough, is I've been calling the gospel an early warning system. What I mean by that is the gospel actually allows us to see addictions for what they are a lot sooner than the world does. The world says you have to meet this threshold, generally quantity and frequency, whether that's drinking, whether that's porn, whether that's whatnot, right? But the gospel says, hey, anything that's misordered is disordered, right? So even if you're not getting drunk every night, but you have placed this in as on the pedestal of your life, then that's a problem that you need to address. It's an early warning system. Before it gets so bad, the gospel helps you see, hey, take a look at this. I'm warning you. I'm letting you know. And so that's what I think Allie's story helps us see. So if that resonated with you, if anything from this episode resonated with you, please share it. That's what I ask. You can like, subscribe, all the things, but please share it. That's what I'm asking. once again, thankful to our partners at Life Audio, lifeaudio.com, for helping keep this podcast going. 110,000 downloads strong. And I'm so, so grateful. If you want to watch this podcast, you can at theveritasdaily.com, theveritasdaily.com. Every single one of these podcasts is available to watch. Love you all. We'll see you next week.